The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening has always been a game that I've wanted to get around to playing. Upon hearing that it was being remade for the Nintendo Switch, I felt as though this was a perfect opportunity to dive into this experience which is beloved by so many. But did it live up to the immense praise which so many bestow upon it? And did the fresh coat of HD paint do the game any favours? Find out in this review. Right off the bat, it has to be said that the game looks beautiful. The simplistic art style and toy-based character designs are not only unique, but also serve as the surreal nature and premise of the game. Koholint Island and its inhabitants are as bizarre as they are endearing. This is especially true of the Mario characters, several of whom make appearances within the story, and honestly, I'm all for it. The music, meanwhile, is both lush and kooky, and creates an atmosphere into which you can sink hours upon hours. The overworld here is also partly to thank for this. Fruit on trees, hidden seashells, rushing water and such all form a beautiful environment which feels lived in. These cute details and its overall aesthetic also make this feel somehow like a bite-sized package of the tropical serenity evoked by the Wind Waker. The world has also aged incredibly well, and it's a joy to explore and chip away at areas which were once inaccessible. This is aided by the pin system, which I'm hoping is, at this point, a staple of all Zelda games going forward. The blank sections of the map are peppered with faded drawings of distinct monuments, which produces a desire to explore them, as well as a premature glimpse of things to come. Telephone huts are also useful for players who may find themselves easily lost, and seems to be a more subtle approach to hand-holding than the Sheikah Stones first introduced in Skyward Sword. The only time these felt oddly forced was a late-game quest required to progress in the main story. The parameters for this were expressed through some very offhand and sparse dialogue hints spattered throughout the world, and in my opinion, the phone hut was a necessity to figure out how to progress, as much as I hated that. One optional storyline which was truly cool to me was the item trading quest. This is a quest which essentially spans the duration of the main game and requires you to trade with a number of characters to meet their requests across the map. Not only is the payoff for this rewarding, but there's just something satisfying about the progression of this being tied to your interactions, like a connective tissue throughout the entire game. On the dungeon side of things, it has to be said that they have more personality than I initially expected from this being a Game Boy port. They are peppered with tightly designed mini-bosses and bosses, and a varying standard of puzzle quality. Unfortunately, some of these areas feel lackluster, especially when there's only one true multi-level dungeon in the entire game. In a way, I understand and respect their desire to maintain the purity of the original game, but it's still disappointing to a first-timer. When I say true multi-level dungeon, I'm referring to the fact that there are other levels to dungeons, however they are typically linear 2D sections of simple platforming. They don't necessarily have much depth, but they're interesting to see in a Zelda game. A 2D boss in one of these games, for example, was one of the coolest concepts yet, even if it didn't quite reach its full potential. The fishing this time is also 2D, and honestly, it might make it the most fun I've ever had in a Zelda fishing side quest ever. It's just so tightly designed and enjoyable. This can also be said for the Crane game, which is admittedly simple once you figure out the formula for victory, but man, is it accurately frustrating and hilarious at the same time. The Color Dungeon is another new addition which yields a nifty reward and a distinct set of puzzles along the way. The same unfortunately can't be said for the newly added Dungeon Builder. While it does a good job of introducing you to all its features through tutorials, the fact still remains that it requires less player interaction than it should. The root issue here is that, as opposed to placing individual elements, you are simply combining a series of pre-designed rooms to meet quotas for keys, staircases, and such. Heart pieces are rewarded for this, but the gameplay here just ends up feeling soulless and brain dead. I also have a few minor gripes here with the overall gameplay. For one, moving in 8 directions with the joystick just feels wrong nowadays. Once again, this comes down to opinion, but I feel as though this would have been welcome regardless of this being a remake. Another issue here is the Roc's Feather. For those unfamiliar, this is essentially a key item which allows Link to jump. This means that it needs to be assigned to a key item button at all times, making the existence of 2 item slots almost irrelevant. In my opinion, an auto jump mechanic would have freed this up and been far superior. And I know this next one might be unnecessarily petty, but when you get a temporary stat boosting item, it shouldn't tell you what it is and its effect every single time you acquire it. This just breaks immersion and is plain annoying. On a more positive note, the story here is one of the most unique as far as Zelda goes. A game not set in Hyrule is immediately a plus in my mind, but going the extra mile and creating such a wild, one-off experience makes all the difference. While I won't spoil it here, the story is equal parts poetic and heartbreaking, and the people you meet along the way make this feel all the more human. I wouldn't say this is as masterful a story as that of Termina in Majora's Mask, but it's damn close. The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening is a game that I've wanted to play for a long time, and this remake most definitely does justice to the mythos and the image of it I had created in my mind for a while now. This game has flaws, yes, but the core experience here is an absolute blast, and the crisp graphics only enhance this tenfold. This is an excellent Zelda game set in a bite-sized world which embodies everything I love about the franchise. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed watching me ramble about insert game here. If you're new to Generic Review Channel, then please subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified when I upload. Also, throw any suggestions on how to improve my content into the comments and I will appreciate you a lot. I'm hoping to upload more frequently and these things will make all the difference with making that a reality. Thanks again for watching. See ya.